Welcome to the next chapter of my set reviews. This one is going to be Ordis, Characters and Heroes. The first one that we have here is Sigismar and Wingspan. Sigismar and Wingspan makes a 1/1/1 token in Hero Expedition every single turn. So that means that you're winning an expedition at the start of every turn. It means you immediately enable the requirements on cards that require you to have several characters, and it means that effects that get boosted the more characters you have are easier to use right away. Sigismar is one of the strongest heroes in the set, but because I am giving only one A per faction to try to indicate which one I think is the best, Sigismar will just get the second best score, because the immediately winning property is very, very powerful. Enabling things very efficiently and having good cards that are pretty exciting to play when enabled is really strong. And the third effect, where you create a big team and try to charge it up, is a pretty good way to win the game. It's a strategy that can win both lanes at the same time, which a lot of times is something you want to do. So we're going to give an emphatic B to Sigismar. Waru and Mac is the one that I'm going to give an A. Waru and Mac has a lot more text than Sigismar. When you play a bureaucrat, you may have it gain a sleep, and at noon, if you control a bureaucrat, you put a token anywhere. Sigismar had to pick a specific expedition. Any turn except the first turn, theoretically you could catch up to the same number of tokens that Sigismar has. And on top of that, as long as you can delay your stats without missing out on the things you need to accomplish, you can put your bureaucrats to sleep over and over again and double the effects they have. And a lot of bureaucrats in the set have really good effects. Though once they're doubled, just looking at the individual cards, they're just very exciting to play. So just Waru and Mac is going to get an A. Okay, I already put it up there. And another thing to keep in mind is that even if you want to do some of the Sigismar things, even if you want to like win both lanes with stats and stop trying to rely on a specific bureaucrat ability that maybe your opponent can play around, he can still do that pretty well because he's getting a lot of these tokens. Because the sleep ability lets you control which lanes will have a lot of characters at a specific time sometimes. So he's really excellent all around. Last we have Goreng and Toxin. I'm going to give her a D. All your tokens get a boost, but before you reach 8 mana orbs, boosted tokens, only boosted tokens, will make that expedition not advance. I think in Altered, failing to advance an expedition is too similar to an expedition getting advanced onto you. So even though she's a defensive character, when I play her, I feel like the idea of being defensive doesn't work the way I might want it to, because if my opponent has extra turns to try to set up a final expedition push, the reserve mechanic lets you do that, the mana zone mechanic lets you do that, so my opponent can use the extra breathing room they got from these skip turns from the defender and make a final push to beat the defensive tokens with all the boosts on them. The idea is that you would try to do a late strategy with her. She's also just crowded out by the other two being so powerful. But I do think even if they weren't making her look bad, she's requiring us to invent something really cool that makes this ability really strong, but it's not there right away. I'm going, I'll do the common Ordises next. This is Paper Herald. This is a 1/1 that has 1 water, and you can use a support ability to put a soldier anywhere. The support ability is deceptively weak because it doesn't pass, after you, it doesn't pass the turn to your opponent. And a lot of times you'd rather use this cheap character to pass your opponent and see what they're going to do. The neat thing about Paper Herald is that you can still do that. The secondary cost is still 1. And you can just rely on the support ability very specifically when you need a forest stat, or you need a mountain stat, or you're going to use every single point of mana in your turn. I'll give this A. And this is a rare version. I wouldn't play the rare version here. The point of these 1-cost characters is very much to pass the turn and see what your opponent is going to do. It's good that we can do this on twice as many expeditions because of this mountain coverage, in terms of, you know, picking a duel on a specific expedition, but it's probably not worth the full rare point. I'll give this one a D. I don't like spending the rare point that way. Ordis Trooper. This is about as strong as the Paper Herald. It's the power of 1/1 is here again, and you have coverage into all the biome stats right away. Since you're usually planning to play the back half on Paper Herald, this is going to give you free stats most of the time. Like, you're going to do what you were going to do anyway with this forest and mountain stat. But really, you could play both, so that's why they both get an A. If you had to play one, I think I would play the Ordis Trooper. Again, I don't, on the 1-drop specifically, I don't want a small amount of stats, because you are very often going to be playing it into an empty lane. This will be a C, because it does have a stat point in every lane, so I'll give it a slight bump over the Rare Herald. Ordis Cadets. Ordis Cadets enables your characters count stuff really quickly, and it has pretty good stats. Unfortunately, you can't put the token into the other expedition. I miscounted that in an earlier review about the Ordis spy character. This is going to be a B. It's a really good 2-cost. Occasionally the water comes up as a weakness more than you think. This is like a beneficial effect, but the characters that want Ordis Cadets the most are Waru and Sigismar. I'm not sure Goreng wants them. So both of those characters already establish presence in both expeditions really quickly. This is still clearly better, it's just not worth a full rare point. I'll just put it as a C. Monolith Rune Scribe. I do really like 2-cost 2/2/2. It plays so much better than you would think it would, but we do have like a little better options going on in the Ordis if you look at the entire faction. So I am going to give this a D. I really don't think you're silly if you decide to play this. It is nice that it starts your character count to just play a regular character, a character that's not asking for specific things to happen before it makes sense to play it. This one draws you half a card. I'll give this one a C. If you had an idea of why you wanted to resupply, you have to control a token to resupply, but that's very easy in pretty much all the Ordis characters. If you do want to resupply and you have a reason to be doing it, I think spending a rare point here is fine. You don't lose enough stats that it's hard to play. And it's nice to spend a rare point on a cheap character that gets that resupply effect out really quick if you wanted it. Monolith Legate. This is an amazing card. The reason I really, really like this card is it has enough stats to be doing things you expect out of a 2-cost character. Like it can flip who is winning if there's a token in a lane, and it can start winning a lane without a mere token catching that lane back up. Like 2/1/2 is close enough to 2/2/2. And it does something else. It does something way better than something else in that common. It sabotages after rest if you fail to move forward on that expedition. With Waru, you can use a sleep effect and like do this for free, which is almost free, which is really, really powerful. But even in other decks, enough of the time, you know, at least a third of the time, you can maneuver to get this to happen, and that's a full half a card your opponent can't use, and you get to pick which one, because you used the Monolith Legate, and it's just a common. It doesn't use up any of your rare slots. So this effect works when you play it from reserve. Oops. This effect works when you play it from reserve, so really we want to play the Legate twice. So we gain a support ability here, but we don't really care. I would say D, I'm very low on spending the rare point to get an option that'll be rarely exercised. Frog Prince. 3/03. This is worse than a 2/2/2 because it's not as defensive, and it usually flips the same lanes. And it's not quite an exciting number of stats like a 4/04. I think the 3-cost 4/04 in Lyra like actually surprises your opponent at your ability to produce stats a little bit more. This is a B. I think Waru often ends up playing it because it has a bureaucrat effect, and even if you aren't doubling a bureaucrat effect, because of the sleep, you get to control when this character actually participates, and you get to make tokens. This is we reviewed some other 1-drops at common, so we just don't need this. I don't usually find games that play out where you have 1 mana left and you need 2 points really, really badly. This is a D. Monolith Archivist. Defender. All the things I said about Goring are like kind of at their forefront here. I think this is designed to go with Waru and Goring, but Defender is less defensive than you might imagine it to be because of how advancements are just also how you win the game. If we get more alternate win conditions in Ordis, this becomes way better. But as long as advancements are something you need to do to close out the game and show your opponent that your defense means you win the game, this is counterproductive. I'll give this a D. And the rare is still a D. I don't want to stack a bunch of bureaucrats in one lane just so that this is a playable card that I spent a rare point on. But since this has situations where it doesn't have Defender, it has more pathways to being convincing. Ozma. Okay, I gave the rare version of this in Bravos a really high grade. This is like an A++, because this is a common, and I'm like excited about it at a rare level. Again, it has those 2-cost stats that are big enough for a 2-cost, and then it does something it has a special ability that can impact the game indirectly and turn the game in your favor in an appreciable way. It's not negligible. So for that reason, I really like Ozma. She's not that hard to turn on. Occasionally you have to play her a little later than you would want to because you need to make sure you get 3 characters in play, but she's not that hard to turn on. And getting this kind of advantage on small plays without using a rare point is a really good add to any Ordis deck. The rare version has 2 more stats. I like that you will probably get these stats into play no matter what, but I don't think you really need these stat points. So I'm going to give this a C. Council. Certain abilities facing the council don't activate. Waru can kind of play 2 bureaucrats with annoying abilities on the same turn when they don't cost 4, which I think is more annoying than this. And you can also just play into the other lane if you have cool hand effects and cool reserve effects. But this is pretty good stats. It is doing some kind of ability. You're probably going to play, you might play 1 or 2 because you're just padding out the numbers and making sure you don't miss one of those soldier triggers on Waru because you couldn't find any bureaucrats to play. So we'll give this a B. This one is back down to the costs that we're more interested in. You do have to spend a rare point to get down to those costs. I'll give this a B again. This one feels more, it feels like it fits a Waru deck more with playing two bureaucrats easily with this lower cost. But you might skip the council entirely or play less than a full 3 copies. Ordis Gatekeeper. You put a 1/1/1 token in the other expedition. The rare version puts a token in both expeditions. This is a good way to get out a lot of tokens. The rare version is some of the most tokens per mana that you can get in Ordis in general. I usually would rather just play a lot of characters instead of needing a card to be multiple tokens. So I'm kind of unexcited by both versions. I feel like I want the common version to be the rare version. I'll give this a C. And I'm hoping that I can use the permanents and make tokens or something else like that. Ordis Spy. You can sabotage. I think Ordis doesn't need sabotage in the same way that the Bravos does. It looks like the rare is going to be on the next page. Let's look at the rare. Where is the rare going? Okay, there. Yes, this is a rare version. I don't think Ordis needs sabotage in the same way that Bravos does. I think Ordis tends to develop such big boards that they can beat anything, and for that reason, I feel like both versions of the Ordis Spy are more skippable. I'll give them both a C. My initial inclination is to just play all 3 heroes of Ordis without any sabotage. Here's Kokoba. Kokoba simply has 2 boosts if you control 3 or more other characters. and it goes up to 3 if you spend the rare point. I think I like the common version better, but they're both compelling. They're both a number of stats and easy enough requirement that they're pretty appealing. I'll give them both a B. It's nice that the common, or really both versions of the Kokoba, if you just play this as your first turn play on one side, pretty often you won't get 2-0'd for doing that, even though you didn't meet this specific requirement, and later in the game the specific requirement is going to make this more powerful. So it kind of, even though it has sort of a downside before you get a bunch of characters, it can accomplish what you need it to do. This is the Ordis Attorney. It's not a B, it is an A. Ordis Attorney just has a pretty typical set of stats and draws a card when the expedition fails to move forward during dusk. Because Waru can be really impressive playing multiple cards, drawing more cards lets you do that, and she's pretty cheap. So she's a real engine in Waru decks. That's what the rare version is. Yeah, so this is even more of that stuff, and being at 2 costs means that you see the card earlier, and as I mentioned before, I really like seeing my card draw early. So I'm going to, I guess, A+ and A, but these are both great cards. I guess maybe the common is a B because this rare is so impressive, you should probably be playing it. I've been really impressed with this card. Between Ordis Attorney and Ozma, you can see like all of your deck, and then that lets you run fewer copies of your situational cards, and it can let you use even more of your bureaucrats that way. Jean d'Arc. When I leave the expedition zone, create a token in each of your expeditions. And this is the rare version. 2 tokens in each of your expeditions. The trick with this is to not lose 2 lanes when you put Jean d'Arc out. Because if you lose 2 lanes when you put Jean d'Arc out, then even if you win both lanes the next turn, you're kind of breaking even. Now, maybe you wouldn't normally be able to break even. That's something to consider. If playing other cards would have also gotten you 2-0'd, then 2-0ing the next turn to make up for it is a lot better than losing because you got 2-0'd. I'll give her a C. I'm really interested to see whether Ordis Gatekeeper or her is kind of the better way to use token themes. But really the fear is that you might be spinning your wheels with her. I will say that I like that as a 4 cost. You can play her on 5 or 6, and if 5 or 6 are turns that you're kind of giving up on winning lanes, it can still kind of do its role pretty well. Whereas some other 4 costs, it's like you add a 1 cost to the 4 costs and you still don't have a good turn on turn 5. See if she plays like that or not. You probably want to spend the rare point if you play this. So let's say that this is a B. Because either way, you're probably getting 2-0'd. And I think the rare version is kind of more emphatic. It's more emphatically winning the next turn. Quetzalcoatl. An opponent draws 1 or more cards or does resupply, create a 1/1/1 token in target expedition. And there's a baby version at rare. I think I'll say that the rare one is an A, and the other one is a B. The effect is pretty easy to not give a token to, but resupply and drawing cards is pervasive enough in the game that your opponent probably will have to sequence differently because of it. I would say this is one of the weakest bureaucrats, but it's still a pretty good bureaucrat. I would say it's a little bit better than the council because it's harder to duck by just going to the other lane. Isatok. Your other expedition and the expedition facing it can't move forward. And it has a draw support ability, which is nice on a high cost character. The rare version is 5 and 5 cost. Oops. Isatok has a very interesting effect. It tends to result in like ties or only one person advancing. It could like lose you the lane that Isatok is actually in, but then you put Isatok to sleep with Waru, and then you cancel out like 2 advancements in the other lane, so you're kind of ahead, or at least break even. I don't know how to tally that. A lot of people have been having success with it. I would think that you can be more consistent if you're running fewer 5 and 6 costs, but at the same time, Isatok can kind of block certain things that the other bureaucrats can't really block. Like a huge Shenlong Isatok can deal with. And it's less awkward to add a bureaucrat to your deck to deal with something like that than it is to add a removal if you're playing Waru. I'll give the common Isatok a B, and I'll also give the rare Isatok a B. B for both. Anubis. Each player sacrifices a character. I'm going to give this a D, and the rare version I'll also give a D. I suspect that this is just going to be inflexible. The times when it's powerful, there's other things that you can do to take advantage of your opponent having just one large thing, like the sticky seal scroll, or paying a rare point to go get the Keelon burst. And I think I'd rather do that than put this in my deck, which is tricky to be able to play. Obviously, you can always remove the Sigismar token, right? But if you're going first, and this is your 4-cost card because you removed a card like the Council to add this to your deck, then when you play a card, you can only remove your own soldier for no benefit when you go first, because you haven't waited for your opponent to put something out there for you to eliminate yet. It might be a lot more powerful than I think, but I worry about it being awkward. Another thing to keep in mind is that most people like to play cheap characters first and big characters later. So that will make it less often that you're able to get a big hit here. Robin Hood. I think this might be the best card in the first set in combination with Waru. And there's another card in this set that you can use to put this to sleep. Characters, well, specifically the rare version is the better one, but really both of them are very, very powerful. Either characters or cards cost 1 more to play for the opponent. Usually you like to play 2 cards a turn, so this is the equivalent of removing 2 mana from your opponent. And that's even more powerful than if you were to gain 2 mana for yourself, because it keeps your opponent from making their deck do the thing their deck is supposed to do. It also weirdly has like pretend ward, because if you play a spell to remove it, that at least that spell will cost 1 more. So this is a very powerful way to get ahead in the game. It even lets you compete in the other lane, because like all of your opponent's characters, no matter which expedition they commit them to, they're getting characters that are 1 mana smaller in terms of their sizing because they need to pay more. So Robin Hood can kind of lead to winning both of the lanes. Very good card. Thoth. My expedition fails to move forward during dusk. Create a 1/1/1 token and target expedition after rest. This one does not get the cost reduction, but it gets twice as many tokens. I'm going to say Thoth is an A for the common and B for the rare. You have to put both the tokens in the same expedition, which keeps the rare from being as impressive, although the rare is still very strong. If you play charge, then you're getting 2 more stats on the place where the tokens went to. But you're not always getting those tokens. Sometimes, even in Waru, the second turn that Thoth is in play, you might not get the tokens. Or it's possible not to get the tokens the first time if you put Thoth to sleep in a lane and your opponent just does not play there at all. This is still like really good. It's really good to be a cheap bureaucrat because you get the token easier and you get your special effect easier. It's really good to have these kinds of stats like 3/3/2, well-rounded stats. It's good to get a benefit that's always relevant. Although all the benefits we've seen so far are pretty much always relevant. The Thoth is still really, really powerful, and you're going to play 3 copies of one of the versions of this in every Waru deck. Baba Yaga. This seems to be the start of the out-of-faction rares. Baba Yaga draws a card. We have just seen some ways to draw a card at common, and for that reason we don't really need this. I would even say that Monolith Runescribe at rare would be a better way to draw enough cards to get you by instead of this one, which is a 3 cost. So I am going to give Baba Yaga a D. But perhaps some deck that really wants to draw all the cards is just going to max out on every single Ordis card that says draw a card. Who knows? Kadgiran Alchemist. This is a very interesting card because the front side is a 4/4/4 for 3, which is above rate. And then the back side plays like a 1-cost 1/1/1 where you get to wait and see what your opponent is doing while starting an advantage in an expedition. I'm going to go give this a B, but a very positive B. I've been hesitant to give out A's, especially for rares, because a lot of the rares are vying for their point, especially when you might need out-of-faction removals. But this is very strong because it increases the amount of times you can play 1 cost in your deck without adding an entire additional one. And it also has like the Haven Warrior stats where if your opponent plays a 3 cost somewhere and you play this 3 cost and your 3 cost is a little bigger, you might be winning just because of the quality of this card. Kuat the Dissenter. Sacrifice a character in my expedition. This is a D. The Anubis has like a lot more upside than this. If you actually manage to get the Anubis to work and hit huge things, you could be really ahead. This is like breaking even no matter what. They had to pick a faction for the out-of-faction rare, but this probably works way better in Ysmir. The Kraken. Gigantic, sacrifice 2 characters, all regions are water. This is tricky to evaluate. 1 copy could be pretty interesting if you can find an opponent who has low water stats for a turn. It's not going to be hard to sacrifice 2 characters. It's just a question of whether you can actually get multiple advancements from doing this. Because if you don't get multiple advancements, the inflexibility of adding a 7 to your deck probably wasn't worth it to break even. I'll just give this a D and say that it probably won't work, so that I can be silly when it's one of the best things. If you can frequently advance both the lanes by doing this, then it can be well worth the risks involved with playing a 7, especially since this isn't an 8 or a 9. 8s or 9s are even tougher to play. This is a promo. Okay, so this time I remembered to look past the promos because there might be more cards. There are more cards here. Foundry Engineer. The next permanent you play this afternoon costs 2 less. This is a D, I think. It requires a specific timing of when your permanents are going to come out. And in some cases, this might not be enough stats to actually make a difference in whether you won any of the expeditions, because you have to play a permanent as your next play. So if someone plays like a 3/2/2 in front of your Foundry Engineer, and it only takes a 1/1/1 to like catch back up to that, you either have to forfeit the special effect this had, or play the 1/1/1 to catch up to that. I expect those kinds of situations to come up. And sometimes you'll come out ahead on those situations, but you don't want to spend a rare point just to be in a situation where you're trying to come out ahead. In some cases, this can just like lose you half a card, and it costed 0 mana, but you lost half a card, reducing the cost of your permanent on a turn that you were essentially taking off anyway. Foundry Mechanic. This is a much better way to do the thing. It's a 1 cost, but you can use a support ability to make a permanent 1 cheaper. I'm going to give this an A. I think it's pretty exciting for decks based on permanents to be able to vary the timing of when that permanent comes out. And playing a 1/1/1 is like, you can already maybe feel kind of good about spending a rare point to increase the number of 1/1/1s in your deck. Like play 3 Ordis Troopers and then start to play some of these and not play the Thopter unit. So I think this card is pretty cool. And it's a little bigger than a 1/1/1. If you put it directly up against 1/1/1 and water matters, you're flipping the lane. So that's pretty cool. Jan, activate the triggers of target permanent. I think if you look at all of the triggers that are in Ordis, this doesn't ever get exciting enough. So I'll give this a D, just because there's not an exciting enough trigger to do here. The best one would be 2/1/1 tokens, which is like, it's kind of like an Ordis Cadets that you didn't pay any mana for, but the front side was worse than Ordis Cadets. So Amelia Earhart, 2/2/2 the first time, and then you can play it for 1 to be a 3/3/3 for 1? No, I'm getting it backwards. It's a 3/3/3 the first time, and then you can play it as a 2/2/2 for 1. So this is the same total stats and total cost as Khadgar and Alchemist, distributed differently. So let's just give this a D and say that you should play the Khadgar and Alchemist, because the Khadgar and Alchemist distributed it better. That's what I would say. Athena, wow, this is really cool art. If you control 2 or more other characters, I gain 2 boosts, and with 2 characters loses fleeting. So 3/4/4 the first time, and then it starts being a 3 cost 5/6/6. I think I will give this a C. This is a little bit like focusing on permanents and having big turns later, except you're playing a character and having big turns later. But there's no way in Ordis to get this directly into reserve, so you have to play a 5-cost 3/4/4 at some point. Which won't necessarily get you 2-0'd, but could, and more importantly, could get you hit by Sabotage. I like permanents better because I think they're a little trickier to remove because there's not Sabotage going around. So if you take that turn off, and admittedly you might still 1/1 the turn you quote unquote take off with Athena, I would rather not be vulnerable to Sabotage. AlteredTCG. It's a 1/1/1, and then the second time it's 3 different soldier tokens. Or it's itself and 2 more soldier tokens in its expedition. This gets really big with charge. It immediately turns on Kokoba. Immediately turns on probably all your uniques that are hoping that you have lots of characters. It's not quite as exciting as paying a rare point to get 2 1-drops because the second effect isn't a 1-drop, but the second effect is like a really impressive effect that's a little bit better than Ordis Gatekeeper. I'll go ahead and give this an A because the Sigismar deck should exist in some form and should want tokens, and I think this is a better way to go after them than the Gatekeeper. We have to pick some way to do that. You can't only use the permanents. But I think I don't remove all the 1-drops from my deck just because I have this, because it doesn't play 1-drop multiple times. Haven Trainee. Create a 1/1/1 soldier token in each of your expeditions. I'm going to give this a D. I think the other ways of making tokens are better. And you're kind of locking the tokens up behind the condition of playing a 4-cost, which I think playing a 4-cost is something that happens at specific times and not something you can guarantee happens just all the time. So you can't do 4+3 until you have 7 mana orbs, and 3 is one of the more common costs that you're trying to incorporate in your turn. So AlteredTCG is a little better, Ordis Gatekeeper is a little better. It's a little different from the Bravos version where we're playing the common version, we're not spending a rare point, and also the 4-cost one is the 4-cost is like the skippable part, and the 2-cost at common is the exciting part. Haven Warrior. 4/4/4, and you can give a boost to the next thing you play. Ordis has a lot less rewards for just throwing a boost onto something, but a 3-cost 4/4/4 is pretty cool. I'll give this a B on the principle that I think the Kagurian Alchemist is better, so it should be higher. Maybe that should have just been an A. But the Kagurian Alchemist lets you flood the board and play the Sigismar themes better because the second character is cheap, which means you're getting more things out and turning charge on better. This one actually like reduces the number of characters you have to work with if you actually use the support ability. So it matches what Goring is trying to do and what Sigismar is trying to do less, and it's a soldier, so Warrior doesn't care. Atlas. Tokens you control have gigantic. This is like very exciting and very difficult to put a good value on. If you set up a bunch of terminates, this can be like a coup de grace that makes sure that your permanents mean winning both the lanes. Atlas is very expensive, and there may be other ways to ensure that you win both the lanes due to all your permanents. I'm going to go ahead and give this a D. I think you're probably like removing a rare charge from your deck to add this to your deck, and the rare charge is more flexible. If you're in a tough spot, you can play the charge as if it's a 2 mana 1 cost character early in the game. You can't really do that with this, but it's possible. We'll find out later on that this is the best payoff. This is actually better than that stuff. Achilles. Spells and abilities that target me cost 1 more. This is interesting in that it's like the opposite of Jean, because Jean is like I want to put 5 mana into 1 card and still have the back half available, and I want to win the turn after I play Jean. And Achilles is like, I want to put 5 mana into 1 card, and I really want to make sure that I win at least 1 lane when I put the 5 mana into the 1 card. And with a Sigismar token, you can like even more reliably do that. Or if you put this next to a sleeping bureaucrat that just woke up, you could pretty reliably do that. Overall, you can probably find a different way to do this with commons. So I'm going to give it a low C. But it is an interesting way to spend your turn 5 while you're waiting to have more mana to do some of the combo plays that Ordis can do. Sandman. This is big A. Because Sandman is both a character and a removal. It's a temporary removal, but on the last turn of the game, it's a permanent removal. And even before that, Sandman can sleep your own characters in Waru, which lets you get an entire extra turn of the bureaucrat effect. It also can confuse your opponent's plans about which lanes you're trying to win. You can like suddenly start losing a lane, which turns on all your special effects for that lane, and can also make like a really large character that your opponent played over there feel like a waste. You also get 2 boosts on the bureaucrat that you put to sleep, which is just gravy. And the back half costing 2 for an 0/3/3 is like as good as Frog Prince. Of course, this is not a bureaucrat, so remember you won't get to put it to sleep itself, and you won't get to make a token. But it can target itself if you really want to. I did that in one of my games where I couldn't win any new lanes, but I could play the Sandman, put the Sandman itself to sleep, and then have him contest the lane the next turn. This is a really good card. Verdant back. I have Defender unless you control 2 or more bureaucrats. I really wish this was a bureaucrat. I wish the shifting element of it like went all the way to changing this character to be a bureaucrat. Because this would be more interesting than the Monolith Archivist that wasn't compelling enough. Maybe I would be willing to do this, but since it's not a bureaucrat and it costs a rare point and Defender is questionable, I'm going to give this a D. And I would actually rather just play it. I'd probably play Achilles in a lot of the same spots. If I wasn't just playing the Council, that would be the level 0 thing to do, is play the Council instead of this. It's showing me a page 3, which is the same as page 1. I think the database is a little funny. Maybe these are alternate hearts. So there were some at the beginning we're going to go to now. Now these also showed up. Okay, this might conclude the video. So I'll talk about the next video. The next video will be the permanents and spells for Ordis. And I'll say that the Sigismar seems to rely on them a good bit more, but Warumek has a really powerful one. So I hope you tune in to see that one. It's very pretty. And after that, I'm hoping to knock out all the 4 other factions. Thank you for watching my video.